The shadow is not always hidden in subtle gestures or whispered doubts. Sometimes it reveals itself openly through cruelty. When someone deliberately harms another, when they inflict pain not by accident, but with intent, what emerges is not only the act of aggression, but a mirror of their unacknowledged darkness. Cruelty is not random. It is a manifestation of what lies beneath the surface of a person's psyche, a discharge of what they refuse to accept within themselves. In this sense, every act of intentional harm is also a confession, a revelation of the inner battles they cannot face directly. Cruelty is the externalized language of the shadow. Instead of turning inward to examine their own fears, insecurities, and inadequacies, individuals project these denied aspects outward, targeting others. This is why cruelty so often feels personal, but is rarely about the victim. The victim becomes a vessel for another's self-hatred, an unwilling participant in their inner conflict. It is easier to strike at another than to wrestle with the unbearable truths hidden within. When a person insults, mocks, or manipulates, they are not just expressing disdain for the other, they are exposing the unresolved fractures of their own soul. The shadow seeks expression. If denied recognition, it forces its way through destructive actions. When people hurt others on purpose, what they are truly doing is disowning their own darkness, thrusting it onto someone else. They find temporary relief in this act, as though the cruelty can exorcise what they cannot integrate. Yet this relief is short-lived. The cycle repeats because the shadow cannot be destroyed by projection. It only grows darker and more demanding when ignored. Every cruel word, every calculated act of harm is evidence of an unintegrated inner life that has been banished but not silenced. Cruelty also carries with it a strange intimacy. The person who harms often sees in their victim a quality they cannot accept in themselves. It could be confidence, joy, authenticity, or vulnerability. Instead of embracing these qualities within, they attack them in others. This is why cruelty is often directed at the strong, the authentic, the ones who shine too brightly. The act of harming becomes an unconscious attempt to dim the light that threatens to expose the shadows they are unwilling to face. Thus, cruelty is both an attack and an admission, a weapon and a revelation. It is important to recognize that cruelty is not simply about power. Though power is the surface expression, beneath it lies fear. The shadow that reveals itself in cruelty is rooted in fear of inadequacy, fear of being seen, fear of facing the truth. Cruelty serves as armor, a shield to protect the fragile self from collapse. To understand this is not to excuse it, but to perceive its true nature. Behind the sharp words and the manipulative actions lies a frightened psyche unable to hold its contradictions. The shadow pushes outward, desperate to avoid the gaze of the conscious mind. The revelation of the shadow through cruelty is also an opportunity for those who experience it. When you are the target of cruelty, you are witnessing someone else's unhealed shadow. This does not diminish the pain, nor does it erase the injustice, but it can transform how you respond. Instead of absorbing their projections as truth, you can see them as evidence of what they cannot handle within themselves. Their cruelty becomes a message, not about your worth, but about their refusal to integrate what they fear. To see cruelty this way is to reclaim power from it. The shadow revealed in cruelty is also a warning to every individual. What we deny in ourselves, we risk inflicting on others. To avoid becoming the source of cruelty, one must turn inward and face the shadow honestly. It requires courage to admit envy, anger, fear, or weakness, and yet doing so prevents those energies from emerging as harm toward others. Unacknowledged shadow demands expression, but when integrated consciously, it transforms from cruelty into insight, from projection into self-awareness. The act of facing the shadow dismantles the cycle that perpetuates intentional harm. Cruelty reveals more than the darkness of another. It reveals the universal truth that within every human lies the capacity for harm if the shadow is ignored. It is not an anomaly reserved for the malicious, but a potential in every psyche. This recognition demands humility. It asks us to look not only at the cruelty inflicted on us, but at the small ways we too might project our shadows. To understand cruelty as shadow expression is to accept that the line between victim and perpetrator is not absolute, but a matter of inner work. A matter of whether one chooses to face their shadow or unleash it onto others. Thus, cruelty is never just cruelty. It is a revelation. It is the mask slipping, the darkness stepping into the light, the shadow announcing itself with brutal clarity. When cruelty emerges, the hidden becomes visible, and what was repressed declares itself in action, showing the world what the conscious self cannot yet admit. Power does not always announce itself in loud declarations or visible victories. Often it lives in the quiet strength of conscious detachment. To detach consciously is not to withdraw in weakness or to escape responsibility, but to step back with awareness, to refuse the pull of manipulation, and to reclaim authority over your inner state. Detachment of this kind is not indifference, but mastery. It is the deliberate choice to no longer be controlled by the hooks others throw into you, whether through cruelty, expectation, or emotional demand. When people seek to provoke, they rely on reaction. They depend on your anger, your defense, or your need to explain, because those responses confirm their power over you. Conscious detachment breaks this cycle. It denies them the satisfaction of pulling your strings. By choosing to detach, you declare that your energy, your attention, and your peace are not available for exploitation. This is not avoidance. It is a conscious refusal to participate in a dynamic that diminishes you. Power lies here because the one who cannot be provoked is the one who cannot be controlled. Detachment requires awareness of your own inner triggers. Every wound, every unresolved fear becomes a point of entry for others to manipulate you. When you cultivate detachment, you learn to see these points clearly. You observe where you are most easily provoked and recognize that the reaction is not created by the other, but awakened within you. This insight allows you to pause, to breathe, and to separate your identity from the attack. In that pause lies strength. The person who cannot make you react begins to lose their influence. What once felt like their power is revealed to be only your unguarded vulnerability. Conscious detachment is also an act of preservation. Your energy is finite, and when you spend it defending against every attack or proving yourself to those who seek to diminish you, you become drained and weakened. By detaching, you conserve this energy for what truly matters: your growth, your vision, your peace. The cruelest act of defiance against those who hurt you is not to match their hostility, but to rise beyond it, to move forward untouched, to refuse them access to your inner life. They expect you to collapse, to chase, to beg, to fight. Instead, you step back with dignity and build your strength where their reach cannot touch. There is also a profound clarity in detachment. When you are tangled in emotional reaction, the truth becomes obscured. Their words, their actions, and your pain blur together into confusion. By stepping back, you see more clearly. You recognize that their cruelty says more about them than about you. You discern which battles are worth engaging in and which are traps designed to consume your spirit. Detachment sharpens perception. It allows you to see the structure of manipulation, to understand the motives behind the mask, and to free yourself from being a pawn in someone else's unconscious game. Power in conscious detachment also comes from self-definition. Those who seek to control often do so by defining you through insult, through labels, through narratives meant to reduce your sense of worth. Detachment removes their authority to name you. You know who you are, and their words pass over you without lodging in your identity. You do not absorb their judgment because you no longer need their validation. This freedom from external definition is a source of immense strength. For once, you no longer rely on others to confirm your value, you become unshakable. Detachment should not be mistaken for numbness. It does not mean you feel nothing. It means you are not enslaved by what you feel. Pain may still arise when someone harms you, but through detachment, you observe it without allowing it to dictate your choices. Anger may flare, but you do not act from it impulsively. Fear may whisper, but it does not paralyze you. Conscious detachment is the capacity to feel deeply while remaining anchored in awareness, to experience emotion without being possessed by it. This state of balance is a form of power that cannot be taken away. Those who hurt on purpose thrive on reaction. They want proof that they have left a mark, that their words or actions can bend your reality. Conscious detachment denies them this victory. It reveals that their cruelty does not define you, nor does it have the authority to shape your path. When they realize they cannot reach you, when their arrows fall without piercing, they are left with their own unresolved shadow. This is where regret begins, not because you sought revenge, but because your refusal to engage forces them to face what they can no longer project onto you. Conscious detachment is not just a shield, but a foundation for transformation. In detaching, you create space within yourself. That space allows reflection, healing, and the integration of your own shadow. It turns pain into wisdom and wounds into teachers. By refusing to be entangled in another's projections, you turn inward and reclaim what belongs to you. The energy that once went into defense is redirected toward growth. The silence that detachment creates becomes fertile ground for clarity, creativity, and strength. In a world that thrives on reaction, conscious detachment is rebellion. It breaks the cycle of cruelty and projection. It denies others the power to dictate your inner state. It reveals where true authority resides, not in domination over others, but in mastery over oneself. To detach consciously is to step into this authority fully, to hold your energy, your peace, and your dignity as sacred, and to move through life with the unshakable knowledge that no one can control what you refuse to surrender. Strength does not always roar, nor does it always announce itself with forceful words or grand gestures. More often, true strength is silent, steady, and unshakable. The loud display of power can deceive, but it is in the quiet endurance, the composed restraint, and the refusal to be rattled that strength reveals its most authentic form. Silence is not weakness as many assume. It is the disciplined choice to let actions, presence, and resilience speak in ways noise never can. The loud person often confuses volume with influence. They raise their voice, assert dominance, and attempt to overwhelm others with sheer force of presence. But this is not true power. It is compensation. Those who must shout to be heard, who must impose to feel secure, often betray the fragility hidden beneath the noise. In contrast, silent strength carries itself effortlessly. It does not need to prove, argue, or demand acknowledgement because its power is intrinsic. It is the calm in the storm, the unwavering gaze that unsettles, the quiet decision that reshapes everything without fanfare. Silence has its own gravity. It creates space where words cannot reach. When someone attacks with insults or cruelty, the loud reaction is expected. They want to see you break, defend, retaliate. But when you meet aggression with composed silence, you deny them control. They feel the weight of their own words bounce back at them, unanswered and unresolved. Your silence becomes a mirror, forcing them to confront their own shadow without distraction. It is in these moments that strength shows itself not by domination, but by stillness that cannot be moved. Silent strength is deeply rooted in self-knowledge. The person who knows who they are has no need to explain it endlessly. They do not live to convince others of their worth or their power. They simply embody it. The loud demand recognition. The silent already possess it. This is why silence unnerves the insecure. It exposes the emptiness of noise and the desperation behind the need to be heard at all costs. Silent strength radiates authenticity, and authenticity cannot be faked or fabricated. Restraint is another dimension of silent strength. It takes little effort to explode in anger, to retaliate impulsively, to meet insult with insult. But it takes immense discipline to hold one's composure, to channel that energy inward and to choose wisely rather than react wildly. This restraint is not suppression, it is direction. It is the recognition that not every battle requires your engagement. Not every provocation deserves your response. Not every attack needs your retaliation. By refusing to be dragged into chaos, silent strength preserves energy and redirects it toward what truly matters. The silent kind of strength also speaks through endurance. Life's greatest challenges are rarely overcome by dramatic outbursts or loud declarations. They are met in the quiet persistence of daily resilience, the choice to keep moving forward despite pain, the willingness to stand tall without recognition, the ability to endure without complaint. Those who appear unshaken are not devoid of struggle. They are masters of it. They fight their battles inwardly, and their silence becomes the testament to victories unseen. Endurance in silence is perhaps the most profound expression of strength because it reveals stability when everything else trembles. Silent strength also transforms relationships. Loudness often escalates conflict, but silence creates space for reflection. When one person refuses to be drawn into reactive noise, the dynamic shifts. The manipulator loses their grip. The aggressor feels their emptiness, and the conflict burns out without fuel. Silence interrupts patterns of control and dominance, forcing others to recognize their own behavior. It becomes a powerful tool not only for personal preservation, but also for dismantling cycles of toxicity. There is also a sacredness in silent strength. In silence, one listens more deeply to intuition, to the subtle movements of the heart, to the truths that noise obscures. Strength that is silent arises from this inner connection. It trusts in itself, in its vision, and in the natural unfolding of life. It does not need to declare victory, because victory is found in the very act of staying aligned, undisturbed, and authentic. This form of strength transcends appearances. It becomes an unspoken language of presence that others feel without explanation. Silent strength is not passive. It does not mean you allow injustice or cruelty to persist unchecked. Rather, it means you choose when and how to act with precision. Loudness scatters energy. Silence gathers it. When you finally move from a place of silent strength, your action is sharp, undeniable, and transformative. It is not diluted by desperation or the need to prove yourself. It comes from clarity, and that clarity makes it powerful. Those who underestimate silence often learn that when it finally acts, it leaves no doubt. To embody strength that is silent is to step beyond the illusions of appearances. It is to recognize that power is not in noise but in presence, not in argument but in certainty, not in domination but in composure. It is the strength that moves mountains without a sound, that disarms cruelty without retaliation, that grows steadily in the quiet spaces where others cannot see. It is the kind of strength that endures when noise fades, because silence, when chosen consciously, does not weaken. It magnifies what is unshakable within. Integrity is not an option for the self, it is a demand. The deeper layers of who you are cannot be deceived by appearances, pretenses, or compromises that betray your truth. You may convince others with a facade. You may even attempt to convince yourself, but the self knows. It carries within it an unyielding demand for alignment, a call to live in accordance with what is real rather than what is convenient. To ignore this demand is to fracture within, to feel the persistent dissonance of living a life that does not reflect what the soul recognizes as true. Integrity is not about perfection. It is about wholeness. To live with integrity is to gather together the scattered parts of your being, the words you speak, the actions you take, the values you hold, and bring them into coherence. When these elements align, a profound strength emerges. You no longer need to manage appearances, hide contradictions, or maintain illusions. Integrity frees you because it unifies you. Without it, you are divided, torn between the mask and the reality, burdened by the effort to sustain what is false. The self demands integrity because without it, the psyche cannot rest. The demand for integrity often reveals itself through discomfort. Whenever you betray yourself, by agreeing when you mean no, by staying silent when you should speak, by acting against your own values, you feel it. That unease is not random. It is the self refusing to be silenced. It speaks through tension, through guilt, through the quiet sense that something is off. People may dismiss these feelings as inconvenient, but they are signals pointing toward misalignment. The self does not allow you to escape the consequences of disowning your truth. Even if you bury the discomfort, it resurfaces as anxiety, restlessness, or dissatisfaction. Living without integrity eventually corrodes the spirit. It creates fractures that weaken your inner foundation. When you compromise your values for approval, you create dependence on others' validation. When you act against your convictions for comfort, you erode trust in yourself. Each small betrayal accumulates until you feel disconnected from who you are. This disconnection breeds despair because the human spirit longs for authenticity. The self demands integrity because it is only in authenticity that life has meaning. Without it, existence becomes performance, a hollow repetition of roles without substance. Integrity also demands courage. It is easy to follow the path of least resistance, to say what others want to hear, to blend into expectations. But the self will not be satisfied with that. It pushes you toward honesty, even when honesty risks rejection. It calls you to act with principle, even when principle costs you comfort. This is why those who live with integrity often stand apart. They refuse to bend to what betrays their truth. Their strength does not come from arrogance, but from obedience to an inner law that will not be silenced. To live with integrity is to risk misunderstanding, but it is also to gain the peace of knowing you have not abandoned yourself. The demand for integrity also transforms relationships. Without integrity, connections become fragile, built on performance and pretense. Words lose their weight when they do not match actions. Promises become empty when they are not honored. Trust erodes, and what remains is a web of appearances rather than genuine connection. But when integrity guides your being, others sense it. They may not always like it, but they respect it. Integrity creates clarity. It draws those who value truth and repels those who thrive on manipulation. In this way, integrity becomes both a shield and a filter, shaping the environment around you by the quality of your presence. Integrity is not only a moral demand, it is also a psychological necessity. To live in contradiction drains energy. To maintain falsehood requires constant vigilance, a continuous effort to cover tracks and hide inconsistencies. Integrity removes this burden. It simplifies life because the inside and the outside match. You no longer flow against yourself. Your words, actions, and intentions move in one direction. This alignment creates inner peace, not the fleeting calm that depends on circumstances, but the deep stillness that comes from knowing you are whole. Integrity also sharpens perception. When you live truthfully, you see truth more clearly in others. You become less susceptible to manipulation because your own clarity exposes deception. Those who live without integrity constantly wrestle with doubt, not because the world is unclear, but because they themselves are divided. Integrity restores trust in perception. It strengthens intuition. You begin to feel instantly when something is off because the inner noise of self-betrayal no longer distorts your awareness. The demand for integrity, then, is not a moral burden, but a path to freedom. It liberates you from the exhausting task of pretending, from the anxiety of maintaining masks, and from the shame that follows every compromise. To live with integrity is to stand in your truth, even when it costs you approval. It is to value peace of soul over comfort of circumstance. It is to speak when silence would protect your image, and to be silent when words would betray your understanding. The self will not rest until you align with it, because integrity is the only state in which you are undivided, unbroken, and whole. When you finally surrender to this demand, life simplifies. Choices become clearer, relationships deepen, purpose becomes less about achievement and more about authenticity. Integrity is not perfection, it is coherence. It is the unshakable sense that what you are within matches what you show without. In this unity lies real strength, not the loud strength of appearance, but the quiet power of truth lived fully. And when you live this way, you become unshakable. Not because life stops testing you, but because every test reveals the same answer. You will not betray yourself again. When you rise beyond cruelty, when you detach with awareness, when you stand in silent strength and live with unshakable integrity, you step into a rare kind of power. The kind that no manipulation, no cruelty, and no noise can touch. Transformation becomes your quiet victory. Proof that light not only survives the darkness, but is often born from it. This is not about revenge, but revelation. Not about proving anything to others, but returning to yourself, whole, grounded, and untouchable. Because the greatest strength you will ever possess is not in domination, but in mastery of your own mind. This is Headline Truths, where we uncover the psychology behind power, pain, and transformation. If this message spoke to you, reflect on it, share it, and remember, truth doesn't shout. It stands silently, and it endures.